Well, it's finally here. Happy Breeders' Cup 2019. We're counting down the hours for the World Championships at Santa Anita, and we're doing it the only way we know how, by handicapping the races, of course, using Stats Race Lens. I'm Dan Tordjman with America's Best Racing, thrilled to be joined yet again by my friends Christina Blacker from TVG and Joe Rosen, NHC Tour Rookie of the Year and co-owner of multiple horses, including a few running this weekend. We'll get to that in just a bit. As we know, as we start tackling and diving into these races, one of the most important things we can do all weekend is pay attention to how the track is playing. Joe and Christina are both Californian, both based in California, and Santa Anita is their home track. And I'll start with Joe. Joe, you follow the circuit closely. What should we expect in terms of any preferred running styles or biases on the dirt and turf this weekend?
Well, at least to the dirt, they're saying that the dirt track is a lot deeper than it was during the spring, mainly because of the issues that they had during the spring. And it seems that horses that fall too far behind, the latecomers, are having a lot more trouble getting to the wire before the leaders. So I don't know if we're going to see as many horses coming from behind, at least as to the dirt. Now on the turf, I've seen a lot different in the last couple of weeks as the fall meet has been going on. I've seen a lot of horses sitting off the lead and catching the leaders right at the wire.
Okay. Yeah, it seems consistent with some of what I've heard here, just being in California over the past few days, being at Santa Anita. For people who watch the races here on a day in, day out basis like you and Christina do. And Christina, you spent a lot of time around the trainers and horses who will compete this weekend. Are there any little tidbits that you've picked up that we won't find as we're looking through the PPs?
Yeah, I think so. I think, when you're out in the morning, for me, I find that that's when you really learn the most. I'm actually going to be as the analyst tomorrow morning on the breakfast of the Breeders' Cup show. So we're going to go back over some of the standout works from this entire last 10 days pretty much. But I think there's a couple horses that have really looked good. Got Stormy has really stood out. She seems to love it here at Santa Anita and just has a beautiful way of going. Donna Veloce continues to look very good in her works for Simon Callahan. Castle Lady has made a nice appearance. Decorated Invader has a big, beautiful stride and seems like he's doing everything so easily. He would be a horse that I would point out. And then just as far as kind of talking to people in the buzz, Bob Baffert is really touting Improbable. He's talked to me about him. He's talked to multiple other TVG analysts. It seems to me that anytime someone wants to chat to him, that's the first horse he's bringing up right now. I'm not really listening because I'm picking Omaha Beach in that race. A little bit of a spoiler alert, but I do think that it's very noteworthy that that's the horse that he seems to be kind of the most pumped up about coming into the weekend.
Well, here's a spoiler for me. I've been burned so many times by Improbable. I am not going back down that well again myself. So, if he wins, he wins. I know Joe, I think, likes Improbable. Once we get to that race, we'll talk a little bit more about it. And sad to hear that you didn't bring up, in terms of the good workers, you didn't bring up Mirth or Secret Spice. I'm sure Joe was waiting to hear their names there when you mentioned who looked good.
Everybody looks good. Little Red Feather team is good to go, and I was trying not to be too much of a homer because Dan has the horse too, so our horse looks good too.
I would say every horse that's here looks good right now. I mean, we've got the best horses in the world coming here to Los Angeles to compete for those 2 days, and you're not going to find any better racing anywhere in the world.
Absolutely. Well, we're about to dive into the Breeders' Cup races, but first, an important announcement for anyone who wants to test out Stats Race Lens. This week only, you go to equibase.com, you click on the Stats Race Lens tab, and you get 30% off Race Lens and True Odds when you use the promo code SRLBC19. So that's SRL for Stats Race Lens, BC for Breeders' Cup, and 19. We've done promos in the past, but this one is one of the best. 30% off right now. Again, the promo code is SRLBC19. So let's get to it. Friday, race 5, the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint. Kick things off here in a pretty wide open race. Looks like a great betting race. Your favorite is going to be number 9, in all likelihood, Four Wheel Drive, the Wesley Ward trainee who blew away A small field at Belmont last out in the Grade 3 Futurity posted a strong 98 Equibase speed figure in just his second career race. Then there's the other ward, the filly, number 7, Kamari. She showed an explosive turn of foot in the Indian Summer last out at Keeneland, going from last to first in the stretch. Christina, I believe you like Kamari a little bit.
I do indeed. I was there at Keeneland on October 6th when she won the Indian Summer, and it was just so impressive. I mean, you could tell that this filly is something special. And you can also tell just by looking at her past performances in that, Wesley Ward expected a lot of her very early on. She broke her maiden by 15, going 4.5 furlongs, which I think is pretty difficult to do. It's basically the length of the stretch. And then they went straight to Royal Ascot, and she was second in the Queen Mary behind Raffle Pride, big full field of 25 there that she faced. And she's won her subsequent 2 starts here in the States, one at Saratoga, one at Keeneland. The True Odds page is always one that I look to, especially on the turf, especially when you're talking about sprinters. And she has a very strong late pace figure. I'll always kind of sort them that way just because I'm curious about it. And she's right up there. This is a star daughter of Munning. She's out of the Cozy Mare, Cozy Up Lady. You can see right there, she is the quickest late in this field. And also just kind of worth noting that Chimney Rock is pretty high as well. And Chimney Rock was right behind her. They both closed very quickly that day. So if you're looking for a bit of a long shot, Chimney Rock is a horse to not forget. Kamari will be my top selection. The stat that I found, though, is with regard to Dr. Simpson, the 8. And I just thought that this was noteworthy because I was pulling the data on the sires of the horses in this field with regard to how they perform in turf sprints. And I started, kind of picking through one horse at a time, but then I ended up taking it for the entire field, and just there's the angle that you're able to kind of modify and show all. But when you look at Dandyman himself, he is one of the standouts. He's at 32% with turf sprinters, and he has a strong enough pool of horses, I think, to really kind of latch onto this. 11 for 34. You're also going to see some pretty high numbers for Kingman, but he's only had a couple horses run so far. But to me, the stat for Dandyman really stood out. So Dr. Simpson will be a horse that I just, long shot, you're going to get a huge price on this filly. But my top pick, Dan, is Kamari for Wesley Ward.
Wow, I would have never known that. That's a really good stat right there that you pulled up using the search tool. So that's helpful. And I'm glad that you actually mentioned Chimney Rock because, as you mentioned, if you like Kamari, I don't think there's any reason not to like Chimney Rock. And you're going to get at least 4 to 5 times the price, beaten just a half length by Kamari in the Indian Summer. The race 2 back, though, is the one I want to go to. I think it was even more impressive. You can see the trouble indicator there on the right, that little red check mark. And as we pull up the chart, there's the red mark there. And we will pull the replay up right here. Keep an eye on Chimney Rock. He's the 9 horse on the far outside. He's going to get squeezed back here in a bit. It hasn't happened yet. It's about to happen now once they pass the trees. And there it is. He kind of gets pulled up a little bit and loses about 4 or 5 lengths there, which will end up costing him. As this race continues, the horse down on the rail, the 4 horse in the second flight there is Cambria. You look at how much ground Cambria saves. Now probably third flight, they're down on the rail, the 4 horse. And then you'll see the move as they turn for home that Chimney Rock makes. Chimney Rock covers so much more ground, again, after that trouble at the beginning as well. And Cambria really just hugs the rail and just holds off Chimney Rock. Now we get the long stretch and the multiple cameras here at Kentucky Downs as they turn for home. So Cambria's in the yellow there, and there you can see finally, making the move there. And Chimney Rock far outside, looks like he's going to get up eventually to catch Cambria, but ultimately it's Cambria that just holds on. But again, given the trip, given the trouble early, I thought that was really impressive to see, especially for a younger horse, a 2-year-old, to overcome that kind of early adversity and run on the way that Chimney Rock did. I thought was super impressive. As you mentioned, the late pace figure 107, only Kamari, the higher number there. And, if the pace isn't strong enough early, I think Jose, with this draw, should certainly have the option of going from the rails. So Chimney Rock at a big price for me. Joe, quick mention, a horse that you like is also a pretty big price, a horse that I didn't really come by. Tell us why you like Encoder.
Well, let me start by this. I'm personally hoping one horse scratches somewhere in here because I'm one of the owners of Bulletproof One, and it's pretty much the same reason I like Encoder here. I don't think there's much pace I don't believe there's much speed in this race to start with. And I believe Encoder is going to try to jump out to the lead here and just try to run and hide. And you've got Pratt riding, and he knows the course. He knows what to do. And if Encoder gets out of the gate well and moves over and can hold on, I believe you might just see this horse steal the race. It's what I hope Bulletproof One would do if she were able to get in.
All right, so we'll keep our fingers crossed for you. But if not, Encoder, I think here again at the price is an interesting play here. I'm always leery, and again, I'm not accusing you of being a homer, not yet at least. I'm always leery of the California preps in this race in particular. Now, some of the other races, I do like the California-based horses. With this one though, I'm a little leery, how strong that previous race was. But again, as you mentioned, speed could be the secret weapon here. So we'll keep an eye on that one as we move to race 6, which is the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. Only 2 runners in here, shipping in from Europe, but interestingly, 7 of the last 8 winners of this race have prepped in Europe. One of the 2 this year is number 12, Arizona, who's the morning line favorite for Aidan O'Brien with Ryan Moore aboard. They've combined for 4 wins in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, most recently with Mendelssohn in 2017. Second to him that day was Untamed Domain for West Point Thoroughbreds. They're back here with the second choice, number 4, Decorated Invader, who, like Untamed Domain, comes in off a win in the Grade 1 Summer Stakes at Woodbine. Joe, that's the horse that you've gravitated toward, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I love Arizona. I think great horse, but I do believe, and I'm going against my normal Stats Racelands rule here, which Stats Racelands loves Arizona in this race. We have a 5-2 morning line. Stats is putting this horse at even less than even money at times. And normally I wouldn't even question that. But in a Breeders' Cup race, when I think the odds will actually go down on Arizona to begin with, it's just hard to play that type of horse. And you have some negative betting angles here. When you look at Arizona, you've got a trainer who doesn't have the greatest winning percentage here. In fact, I believe there's only won 2 races on the turf in the last at this distance in the last year. So yes, I turned my attention to Decorated Invader. We have Ortiz on board, and he rode him to a win his last time out. And more importantly, I really love this horse's late pace numbers. As I had said before, I've noticed over these last few weeks, those horses coming from behind on the turf have been the wire just before those leaders. And I think that's what's going to happen here. The closers have been really great, and I think that will get Decorated Invader to the winner's circle on Friday. All
right. So, and I think we're going to get a little bit of a price there at least, because as mentioned, Arizona should take most of the action. Christina, I'm going to let you wax poetic about Hit the Road. Tell us why.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing great. And as you saw there on the late pace figures, he's the second fastest late in his races. And I think you can kind of say the same thing for him that you can say for Decorated Invader, in that if you watch their replays, they seem to be doing it very effortlessly so far. So that's what I think is the most exciting about Hit the Road, is that I genuinely believe he is going to get better and has the ability to run faster on Friday than you've already seen. But I also believe that to be true of Decorated Invader. So I'm very afraid of him. Clearly, I'm rooting for Hit the Road. The other horse that I think is worth pointing out as well, though, is Fort Myers, the 13, the other for Aidan O'Brien. I think very often we kind of get hypnotized by the big name, and in this case, it's Arizona, and maybe that last race behind Pinatubo over a soft turf course took something out of him. Fort Myers, I think, is going to be a little more fresh. And if you look at his synthetic record, he's 2 for 2. I watched his synthetic races, and I watched his turf races. He's a different horse, but I think what it is that he likes the spring that you get over a synthetic course. He's having trouble with the give in the ground on the turf courses in Europe. He is going to love the California turf. So I'm afraid of Arizona, but I'm equally afraid of Fort Myers with regard to our colt Hit the Road. I think he's going to run a bang-up race, and I think any one of the horses that we've been talking about are win candidates, and it's going to come down to the trip.
Yeah, that's strong information there too. Again, that you're not going to really find in the PPs, no matter how much analysis you do. So I'm glad you pointed that out, that surface question right there. So there's one to look at. I've got a little bit of a price myself that I'm kind of, in watching replays again. I kind of landed on Vitalogy. Admittedly, my bias is that I'm a Pearl Jam fan, and so maybe that's why. But no, this horse was begging for running room late in the summer stakes. You can see that in the trouble indicator on the right there, 2 races back, finishing second to, or actually rather third to Decorated Invader in that race. He then came back in the Grade 3 Bourbon at Keeneland, drew the 14 post, which ensured that he'd either be extremely wide early or get taken back and have to make up a lot of ground late. As it turned out, he was taken all the way back, but somehow managed to fly from about a dozen lengths out to nearly catch Peace Achieved, who comes back here as well. I think this is a horse who stands to improve and can take a step forward. I like seeing Javier Castellano here. He was on number 7, Andesite, who finished a close second to Structor, who's another one of the favorites here. Yet Castellano opts for this mount. And so I think Vitalogy could be a sneaky one here. Brendan Walsh, Castellano, you're going to get probably about 12 to 15 to 1 on him, I think, at minimum. And he's been running late. And so I see no reason why, with a little bit of pace in here, that he won't make up ground late. Whether he gets there, I'm not sure, but I think the price will be right. So for me, Vitalogy is one to keep an eye on. Let's go to race 7, the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. We'll start by talking about some of the favorites. Right there on the rail is Donna Veloce in Uncle Mo Filly, $800,000 Kaleem Shah purchase. Never faced winners, but she was so impressive on debut that she's been installed as the 3-to-1 morning line favorite here. You can see that 108 Equibase speed figure there. It's got a circle around it. That means it's the best of any in this race. And so obviously Donna Veloce is going to take plenty of action. Another really good looking horse here is the 4 British Idiom, 6.5 length winner of the Darley Alcibiades. And you've also got number 6 Bast, who won the Chandelier last out at Santa Anita. A number of ways to go. Christina, I'll let you go. I mentioned one of the horses that I think you like here in British Idiom. Tell us why.
Yeah, I'm going to settle on her. And I think that just with regard to the race in general, it looks like those that are the least experienced are the most naturally talented. And it's sort of a shame that they were kind of late to the party because they don't have that experience under the belt. I think it's going to help Donna Veloce at least that this race is in her own backyard, so she doesn't have to worry about the ship or everything else. But drawing the rail, it's a lot to ask. She might be the horse that you want for next year, but I think for this year, I'm going to go with British Idiom only because she has that 2-turn race in the Alcibiades under her belt. So Brad Cox is high percentage in a lot of circumstances, but I actually used some numbers with him in Stats Racelinks to find this filly the day she won the Alcibiades. With 2-year-olds that were winners last time out, he comes back at 26% to get the win again, and then 48% of the time those horses do hit the board. I also talked to Liz Crow a little bit about this filly. She picked her out at the sale because you look at the $40,000 they paid for her versus the $800,000 that they paid for Donna Veloce. She's clearly the bargain in this group. And Liz said that one of the things she really likes to do is to try and find the physical force and the physical attributes that she likes, but maybe out of an unfashionable stallion. And that's sort of where Flashback is right now. He's kind of looking for that big horse to put himself on the map. And that's why they were able to pick up this filly. And she really is just an athlete. Liz also told me she's very laid back, that she didn't really separate herself from the pack as, she was kind of coming along early on just because she is sort of easygoing. And I think that's something to keep in mind if you're watching her train. She's not going to do a whole lot, and she's not going to wow you in the morning, but she knows the difference when it comes to race day. She dragged Javier Castellano to the front in the Alcibiades and just didn't look back. So she will be the horse I put on top at Donna Veloce. I wouldn't be surprised if she's able to win, but I just think it's a lot to ask of her right now.
Right. Joe, what do you think of that? I know you like Donna Veloce. Are you concerned about the draw? You think she can overcome it?
Well, you have to be concerned about drawing the one hole, and you also have to wonder whether she could go two turns here. But I was there and saw that race, and she was just a freak. She broke her maiden by winning, I think it was 9 1/4 lengths, huge buyer number. It wasn't even a race. It was almost a walk for her. Great jockey on her. It really is one of those, again, I believe this is one of those West Coast, East Coast things, because you have Donna Veloce and Bass versus pretty much from the West Coast going against British Idiom and Wicked Whisper from the East Coast. And maybe I am being a homer here, but I do like the two West Coast horses the best. When I look at Bass, you've got Johnny V on her and Bob Baffert. You don't get much better than that combination. And Baffert had Johnny V come in specifically to ride two horses that weekend, and this was one of them. And Johnny V won both those races. And I just think the home track advantage might come into play here, as these horses have raced and trained on this track for so long.
Yeah, and look, I'm actually with you. I mean, don't worry about being a homer. I'm from New York, and I actually like Donna Veloce quite a bit too. I pulled up a stat as well on Donna Veloce that's interesting, just on the trainer research that you could do. And again, you could customize these searches any which way you'd like. With Simon Callahan, the past 3 years, second career start stakes races. So exactly what Donna Veloce is doing, taking a horse either out of a maiden win or out of a maiden race, and then going into a stakes race on the dirt. How does he do? Look at those numbers. I mean, those numbers are pretty impressive. 8 starts, 4 wins, 5 in the money. I mean, so it's not like it's a trainer who's just taking a stab in the dark. You see that a lot of times. People get really excited about their horses. Simon Callahan, obviously an established trainer here on the West Coast, but knows what he has. He's not going to put the filly in over her head. Obviously, she's got the talent. I think we've discussed, what the potential concerns would be here, specifically the draw and finding a trip. Also, interestingly here, if you look at who was riding those winners, including Bellafina, Moonshine Memories, Flavian Pratt, who will ride Donna Veloce on Friday. So let's move on to the next race on the Friday card, race 8. It's the Juvenile Fillies Turf. Chad Brown has absolutely owned this race. He's won the last 3 runnings of it and 4 of the last 5. Last year, it was a standout newspaper of record. There doesn't appear to be anything of her caliber, at least for 2-year-old form in this race. Brown is represented by number 13, Selflessly, the Miss Grillo Stakes winner. That's been a strong springboard for this race, too. And I'll let Joe make a case for Selflessly in a moment, because I know he's a fan of that one. I just wanted to mention the 7-horse, Cristal. I think with this one, the PPs don't tell the whole story. She's run some really big races. Her PG Johnson score came after a poor break. She beat Sweet Melania there. When she lost to Selflessly in the Miss Grillo, it had everything to do with her trip. Cristal actually went off as favorite that day. The pace was slow. She went extremely wide. It's pretty amazing that she even closed to within a length of the winner there. And so I think you're going to get a good price here. You look at how they bet her down, and she might be slightly overlooked here, especially because people are, very, aware of Chad Brown's record in this race. Joe, obviously that had to have something to do with why you picked Selflessly, although separately you have a bit of an interest from an ownership perspective as well.
Well, not ownership. I own horses with Eclipse, and this is one of their horses they have sharing in this race. So obviously going to root for my friends with Eclipse Racing here. But if it was a straight bet, yes, I'd be looking at the Chad Brown connection here. I mean, it's hard to beat somebody where they've run the same type of system, getting the horses into this race and have won it for the last 5 years. Has used that stakes race as springboard to win the Breeders' Cup races. And it seems to be just the perfect system that he has going on right now. And at 8-1, it would be fantastic odds. Now, if everybody plays that route and the odds go down and Selflessly goes off at a much lower number, no, I don't think it would be worthwhile playing that horse, because this is really one of the better betting races of the day, because you're not going to have a huge favorite anywhere. I think the morning line favorite, if I'm not mistaken, was 9-2. And if that's where the favorite of the race goes off. This is going to be maybe the best betting race of the day.
Absolutely. Christina, you like a horse that we haven't mentioned yet?
Yeah, I like that 9-2 shot, Albania, the 9 in here for Jessica Harrington and Flaxman Holdings. These are the same connections that brought you Alpha Centauri a few seasons back, and she would go on to be a Classic winner, a Royal Ascot winner, and they have made comparisons of this filly to her and to her ability, and that just speaks volumes to me. She's 3 for 4 so far, and the only loss on her record was in the Moyglare Stud 2 starts back. She had so much trouble that day, was pinched back, and just had no chance to really show what she can do. I think she's going to like the ground here, so she'll be the horse that I put on top. If you're looking for a price, though, I don't see a whole lot of speed in this race. And I think Eddie Keneally's filly, the 4 abscond, she has sprinter speed. She was second to Kamari in the Bolton Landing. So you can use that form depending on what happens in the Juvenile Turf Sprint later on throughout the day. And I went and saw this filly a couple days ago back to the barn. She's a tiny little thing, but she is so nimble and athletic. I think she's going to love it here in California, and I think with that natural speed, she's going to spring away from there. And this race is there to be stolen on the front end, and to me, she's kind of the only one that could do it. So I'll use her and be betting her at a price. But on top, as far as the class goes, I think it's Albania or Dyke in here.
Yeah, I'm with you on Daye as well. It's another one who's always moving late. Again, the pace is sort of a little bit of a mystery in here to me. If it is faster, I think she's one that would benefit from it. And so, yeah, Albania is a threat. I think Daye is a threat as well. Especially, I mean, if you like one, you almost have to use both. I mean, because they certainly, they run sort of similar races. They've been in the same company, and I think they're both equally potent on Friday. So let's now move to the 9th race, the featured race on Friday. It's the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. 2-year-olds going 1 mile and 1/8 for the first time. We're left with a field of 8 horses after the scratch of Maxfield. The odds board will probably reflect a 2-horse race between American Pharoah Stakes winner 8 Rings and Iroquois winner Dennis's Moment. But is there a horse who can take a step forward and get past those two? I know Christina and Joe don't think so. Joe, which one of those two favorites did you land on?
Well, I landed on 8 Rings, but I will. I'll be quick and nimble to switch off if the hometown crowd brings the odds down on 8 Rings to even money or less, which is very possible here. 8 Rings righted the ship last race out after that horrible mishap 2 races back, and ran away pretty much with the American Pharoah Stakes. But I know it did take a lot out of him. His training's been okay since, but the deep track might actually cause him problems here. And I would have no problem flipping over to the come from behind horse here and Dennis's Moment if the odds just aren't there on 8 Rings.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Christina, same sort of feeling?
Yeah, I gotta be honest. I just don't have a lot of confidence in this race. I loved Maxfield, who unfortunately had to scratch. I loved American Theorem, who unfortunately didn't get to make entry date. So now we're left with these 2 horses, and I could see them both winning, but I reluctantly ended up on 8 Rings. But if I'm playing any of the pick 4s or the multi-race exotics, I think you have to just throw in some of the bigger prices, because to me, I feel like we're betting Dennis's Moment off the race 2 back, and with 8 Rings, and as Joe mentioned, that kind of mishap, I'm kind of worried about mentally how he's going to handle everything. I picked 8 Rings, but I don't have a lot of confidence. I think it's a race that you need to get some coverage in, because to me, it could be that wacky one of the day where you have a 20-1 shot.
Well, I'm glad you've teed me up here perfectly, because I've got just the wacky horse who I think can upset this field. Let's go to number 7, Anu D'Or. That's definitely not the way you pronounce this horse's name. Shipping Golden Gate off of the 8-length win. People are going to see Golden Gate. They're going to just gloss over it and say, whatever. I'm not betting this horse. Let's just play that race, at least some of it. Let's just play the early part of that race, early to mid part of that race. A New Door is the 10 horse here. And if you think you're about to see a horse, cut over to try to save some ground or clear the field and get to the rail. That's not what's going to happen. What you're going to see is a horse literally almost intentionally stay 4 to 5 wide for 3/4 of the race and then pull away by 8 lengths. It was, I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a horse cover this much ground and pull away by 8 lengths. And so, look, I don't know what he beat in this race. It's very likely, he didn't beat anything near the caliber of what 8 Rings and Dennis's Moment have been up against. That being said, there's got to be some talent here to do that. Just in one of the most visually impressive ways I've seen is watching. I was like, there's no way this horse is going to show up and just not run. I mean, you can't run that well and not come back. Look, I don't know where he fits in this race, but I would take a shot on him. I certainly would take a shot here. I wanted to just kind of briefly also, if we want to cut out of this, we can go and check some of the summary research for the sires in this race. Just looking at pedigree for the past 5 years, dirt, excluding all weather, routes, 2-year-olds graded stakes. So, the exact situation we're in now, Medaglia d'Oro, there's no one producing more 2-year-old winners in dirt routes and graded stakes than Medaglia d'Oro. I mean, at a higher percentage, certainly. So this is a horse who has the pedigree, who has visually, looks like he's got some freakish ability. And again, he might have, it might have just been because of the company he was running with, but he's one I would take a shot at what I think is going to be a pretty massive price. I also wanted to point out, I like Dennis's Moment quite a bit. My only hesitation with him, though, is the fact that the Iroquois, at least in recent years, hasn't really produced many runners in this race. Not this time. A couple of years ago, ran second to Classic Empire, was probably the best runner to come out of the Iroquois in the past 5 or 6 years. But typically, those runners haven't been able to take their talents to the Breeders' Cup and shine. So that was part of my hesitation with Dennis's Moment. So, but yeah, that being said, I'm with you guys, generally speaking, on 8 Rings. We'll see how this race shapes up. Let's, for now, move on to Saturday, where we've got plenty of big races to cover, great betting races, too, starting off with the 4th race of the day. It's the Filly and Mare Sprint. So this race, in addition to being a great betting race, is also probably one of the most anticipated races of the weekend. You've got some star power in it. You got the Test Stakes winner, morning line favorite, Covfefe. Of course, she drew the rail here. I'm going to guess that's not where Brad Cox and Ellen J. Foxwoods would have wanted her to be. Does that make the path to victory a little easier for a horse like Come Dancing, perhaps? Or maybe it's another horse. Christina, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the rail does challenge Covfefe a little bit. And I want to look at the True Odds page first, just because I think it's worth pointing out just sort of how brilliant she has been and how fast she is on late pace. I mean, she just smashes this field on that figure. You have to pay attention to it. But I think the trip is going to compromise her a little bit. And then going back to her past performances, the other thing that I had a hard time kind of wrapping my head around is if you look at the speed figure she earned in the Miss Preakness, off of that race, she comes back in the Roxalana against older and off of one of her career best figures. She regresses. She's third, beaten 3/4 of a length. Here we are coming off again what is a new career high speed figure for her last time out in the Dogwood. Now she's going to try to come back off of that and face older again. This is the circumstance that has led to defeat for her. So for me, I ended up on Come Dancing, the number 4, Javier Castellano for Carlos Martin. She's done everything so easily this year. And one of her biggest feathers in her cap is the fact that the only horse that's crossed the wire in front of her in a race is Midnight Bisou. That to me was kind of a mic drop moment as I was going through this race as far as the past performances go. And then I looked at some of the numbers with Carlos Martin. When he runs a horse third time off the layoff, which is also always just one of those patterns that you have to like. Third off the break, you tend to get one of your best races and you build to that crescendo. Without blinkers, third off the break, he's 24%. He's 10 for 42. 48% of the time they hit the board. You're getting a pretty good payout for that median win payout, $7.80. So I think Come Dancing is sitting on a career best, whereas Covfefe might take a step back, and you couple that with the rail, might be a lot to throw at this 3-year-old filly. So I'll go with the 4 in here.
Yeah, you make a powerful case there. And I think what really has made Come Dancing so dangerous and so effective this year, especially of late, when she's facing some of these horses in grade 1 and grade 2 companies, that she used to be very one-dimensional. If she didn't have the lead, she couldn't win. Now she's been able to do it from off the pace, almost sort of by accident, a couple of races back in the Ballerina when she just didn't break well and, had to sit off. And so Javier Castellano's done a great job of riding her, getting her to settle, and then making a move. So I agree, Come Dancing should be extremely dangerous. Joe, I know you like a locally based horse here in Lady Ninja. What's the case for her?
Well, Lady Ninja used to be owned by Eclipse Racing, actually, and claimed for $32,000 about 12 months ago by Richie Baltas. And she has just done a masterful job turning around this horse and has turned it into a graded stakes winner. I think she'll go off at pretty big odds. She has shown that she loves the Santa Anita track. She's raced there 10 times over her career, and I believe has been on the board 9 of those 10 times, winning 6 of them. You've got Drayden Van Dyke, who knows the course well, coming back to ride her, and it's a Breeders' Cup Saturday, and somewhere down the line, there are always double-digit odds winners, and this seems like a race with Covfefe on the rail that could actually end up being one of those races that a horse that's double-digit odds can hit the wire first, and I hope it happens for Richie. I don't hope it happens for the Eclipse team that lost this horse a while back, but she has talent. That's all I know.
Well, I can give you a horse at double-digit odds who probably won't win because she never wins, but who always hits the board. One of my favorite horses in training. I go back to a race after race, the 8-horse, Dawn the Destroyer. I actually mentioned it during our Traverse Weekend show. It's clear to me that Dawn the Destroyer is in the best form of her career. She just hasn't gotten the right combination of pace at the right distance for her to actually break through. But I think, the 7 furlongs is exactly the distance that she excels at or can potentially excel at. And I think that she'll actually get the pace here that she needs. But she always finds something, that kind of gets in her way. So I'm not going to, with confidence, back her to win. But I think she'll be a pretty big price again on Saturday. And, I think Dawn the Destroyer is as reliable as any to at least hit the board in this filly and mare sprint. So let's move on now to the 5th race, the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. 6 of the last 7 winners of this race were stabled in California. Joe, I hope you're listening. This is the opportunity. The past 2 years, it was Peter Miller with Stormy Liberal. He's back, but not in great form. Before that, it was Phil D'Amato with Obviously. So, Joe, as I mentioned, you're a Cali guy, but you're not going with a locally trained horse here? Explain.
That is correct. I'm going to be looking at the 2, Pure Sensation here. I think this is going to be turn out to be the best betting race of the day on Saturday. The favorite here most likely will be 7-2 or better, and it's going to be an interesting race because it's being run at 5 furlongs for I think only the 4th or 5th time in Breeders' Cup history. In this case, the start's going to make the difference, and I think Pure Sensation is going to be able to get clear of the 1, Totally Boss, and then just control the rail. More importantly, you have Paco Lopez on board. He's going to run this horse fast and will do his best to hold on, and he does that a lot, as you can see by his winning percentage of 27% in these types of races. He knows how to get to the line, and he knows how to take a picture. This horse has won 4 or 5 races this year, and Lopez was on him for 3 of those wins. And there's just a lot of late. There is a lot of late speed from this in this race with some horses. But if Pure Sensation can break well and get out there, I believe Pure Sensation will be able to hold on, and we'll take that picture in the end.
Yeah, I mean, he's got all the class in the world. It's funny, as I look through his previous races, this is something that sometimes you imagine, you associate with horses. It always seems to me like he gets stuck out in the 12 or 13 post, and now he's running the inside. And that's not actually the case. I mean, he's had some inside draws, and he's had mixed results. I don't think he's in the best form of his career, but like you said, he could really kind of utilize that speed as a weapon here, get out front. He's got the right rider, exactly as you mentioned. So Pure Sensation, a sneaky little pick for a horse with that much class. The one that I landed on is actually on the outside, the 10 horse, Eddie Haskell. As far as I can tell, this is a 5 furlong specialist for Mark Glatt. Going 5 furlongs at Santa Anita, he'd won 3 in a row, including the Grade 3 Daytona, until his fast finishing second last out in the Eddie D. As far as I'm concerned, he was a mile the best that day, considering he had to take up on the rail and he lost about 4 to 5 lengths on the field when that happened. He just got a wicked turn of foot at 5 furlongs. So you can see he's 9 for 14 at the distance, and he's never finished out of the money. He's also beat Stormy Liberal multiple times this year, for whatever that's worth. This horse just, I think with a clean trip, I mean, it's hard for me to envision him not being there late. Curious to see what kind of price we get. I handicapped this before the odds were out, the morning line odds. So I was hoping to see 10 to 1 or 12 to 1. 9 to 2 was a little short. But maybe I didn't uncover anything that was too creative. But I thought Eddie Haskell was going to be tough here in this spot. Christina, you go back to the rail for your pick in this one.
I do, and I kind of went back and forth between Pure Sensation and Totally Boss, and I like the case that Joe's making for Pure Sensation. He's kind of shaking my confidence a little bit, but I ended up on Totally Boss mostly because he's a 4-year-old with some improving numbers. You look at all his speed figures, and whether you check the Equibase speed figures, the Ragusins, or the Thurgoff, he's just getting better each and every time. And he was kind of pulling away in that last race at Kentucky Downs. So I'm going to settle on him, but I did want to just point out a little price if you're looking for one for any of those kind of pick 4, pick 5 type tickets. Imprimis, the 3. At one point, he was good enough to win this race. And you're kind of going back to the spring, to March and April at Gulfstream at Keeneland. And then he went over to Royal Ascot for the King's Stand. That didn't quite go so well for him there over the good ground. And I think he's had some pretty legitimate excuses in his last 2 races. And the Kentucky Downs race, he bobbled over that course. Some horses just don't take to it. And he's kind of a big, strongly built horse. He did not get over that course very well. And then in the Woodford, he was pinched, he was shuffled, he was in traffic. He finally found a seam late, and he did kind of come on. So I'm going to put Imprimis on some tickets as a price. I think you're going to get even more than that 8 to 1 that they have listed there on the morning line. But for my top pick, Totally Boss at the rail.
All right, and I think we might be silly here that we maybe overanalyze this whole thing. When's the last time you saw Frankie Dettori up for Joe Orsino?
Right.
I mean, look, if this horse is good enough for Frankie, good enough for me, 8 to 1. Pretty surprising, actually, see 8 to 1 on the morning line. When I handicapped, I thought he would actually be slightly shorter than Eddie Haskell, which is the horse that I landed on, which is why I was kind of like, oh, maybe more value with Eddie Haskell. We'll see. I'd like to see how the money's spread out, but I think we've covered here pretty well. It's a great betting race, so a number of ways you can go, and I think regardless of who you land on, you're going to get some good money in return. Let's now move on to race 6, which is the Dirt Mile. And this is really the race that, a lot of people are talking about because of the star power that's in it. This race really has it all. Fan favorite Omaha Beach, second start off a long break, came back last out. We also had a huge effort to beat Chancelot coming back in the Santa Anita Sprint Championship. We've also got Improbable coming back to Santa Anita, where he's undefeated for Bob Baffert. Christina, curious to hear where you've landed in this spot.
Yeah, so I mentioned how good Improbable looks and that Bob has been really touting him this week, but I ended up not choosing him myself. I didn't really see a huge excuse for him in the Pennsylvania Derby. I don't think he was really happy kind of taking the kickback. I think he's a horse that likes to be a little farther out in the clear and maybe sitting that sort of catbird seat, which might be possible for him this weekend. But Rafa Bejarano is going to have to really work out a trip from the 2 posts if that is, in fact, the intended goal. And he's also had some trouble at the gate lately, too. So there's just a couple little chinks in his armor for me. I went with Omaha Beach. It's not creative, but he's just so talented. It's a shame that, the way the year went and all the little setbacks, because who knows what we might have seen from this horse throughout the Triple Crown trail. But what ultimately sold me on him, not only that win in the Santa Anita Sprint Championship, but the fact that he picked up right where he left off in terms of his speed figures. And you can see right there in the green, the 111, he's right there in line with the best sprint number that he had earned before, earlier in his 3-year-old season. So I think that's the perfect springboard for him to improve this weekend. Omaha Beach for me, short price, maybe one of the shortest prices on the day, but I think he's just really one of the best horses in training in the entire country.
Yeah, can't argue against that. Actually, cool moment today, near Mr. Mandela's barn with the wounded veterans who were out for Homes for Troops with Sentient Jet. They got to come out and take some photos and play with Omaha Beach for a little bit. Very nice moment on a week that's hectic and crazy for everyone. It was cool to see the time being taken to kind of give those veterans an up close experience with a really awesome horse. Joe, you do like Improbable, and I know you've built quite the case for him. Let's hear it.
Well, I was there for Omaha Beach's win, and just an incredible horse. And the problem here is I think Omaha Beach will go off at even money or less. I think that the hometown crowd is going to bet that horse down, and I just will never bet an even money favorite in a Breeders' Cup race. So I did did look at Improbable. The 3-1 morning line doesn't seem much better, but if I'm right and Omaha Beach goes off at even money, you're going to see better odds than the 3-1. And then you look at the angles that are positive for Improbable. You have 5 furlong bullet work within the last 7 days. Bob Baffert's numbers with shippers in a graded stakes race is just amazing. It's off the chart. And it's his 3rd race off of a layoff, which we've already talked about being a very key thing. So it's something that really turned me on to this horse. And with Baffert being in the money 62% of the time, and you have a impressive sire in City Zip, you just have to love this horse. And I could give you the bad pun that I think Improbable is going to storm the beach here and win the race, but I don't think I'll get many laughs. So I'm just going to say I'm going to go with the odds and play Improbable here.
All right. No, you build a good case, and there's no question. I'm more scared of Improbable at Santa Anita going a mile than I am anywhere else going any other distance. I think this is the spot for him, and I feel like I've said this multiple times this year when I backed him. But this is going to be one time I'm not going to back him, and I'll probably get burned. That being said, I am going to take another horse, a different horse, out of that Pennsylvania Derby. I've been assured that number 3, Spun to Run, is Ellis Starr's play of the weekend, and I can't really argue against this horse at his expected odds, seeing that his Equibase speed figure of 119 in that last race there, granted it was a $100,000 allowance race at Parks, is the best in this field by far. It's got to count for something. This is a horse who hasn't really done much wrong. We talked about that Pennsylvania Derby. That was a really oddly run race. It looked like he wanted to get to the lead early with Paco and got taken back and just ran a really strange race, was kind of wide, came back. Michael Sanchez, you could see there, rode him last out at Parks. And Ira Ortiz jumps on now. If you look at his last 2 races going this mile, you've got the 6 3/4 length win in Stakes Company last out, and then you've got the 7 1/4 length score back in March. So, I mean, this horse is proven at this distance. Granted, he's going to get the acid test here with some class. But I think he's the one moving in the right direction. If we look at the late pace figures here, you'll see that, again, for a horse coming out of the races he's coming out of, this horse is really motoring late. I mean, he is not too far off of, the top 2 there, which again, and those were surprising to see in and of themselves, Giant, Expectation, Sapper Sinclair. But I mean, his number is larger than Omaha Beach there. And he's, again, visually, he's doing things the right way. And I think he's had some excuses in his poor effort. So if you're looking for a price here, I think Spun to Run, even though it's listed at 6-1, I think it's going to be closer to 10-1 once all that Omaha Beach money comes in. And is one that I think could be dangerous. And again, if the horse does not run well, you could send your complaints to Ellis. Let's move on to race 7. It's the Filly and Mare Turf. U.S. runners and Euros have taken turns beating each other really in this race over the past decade. Sister Charlie will try to make it 2 in a row here for Chad Brown. He's won this race 4 times. He'll also send out Thais, who's been a reliable rabbit race after race for Sister Charlie. The Euros do look formidable, though, with the top 2 finishers from the Prix de la Bras shipping in. I tried saying that smoothly. It didn't come out well. That race, though, has produced 2 of the last 3 winners of this race. So wondering where you guys landed. Euro, U.S. horse, Sister Charlie, someone else. Joe, kick us off.
Well, on this race, I have no choice but to just like my horse, which is Mirth. I actually own part of Mirth, as we talked about the last time I did one of these webinars, and I am going to be hoping, praying, and yelling my brains out that she can pull off the major upset of the Breeders' Cup.
All right. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I did that in reverse order. I was going to save that for last. So let me go to Christina instead. And Christina, who did you end up with?
Yeah, well, Mirth is taking on one of the kind of strongest opponents of the weekend, unfortunately. You're running into Sister Charlie here. And so far, since Sister Charlie has come over from France, the only one that can beat her is one of her stablemates. If you look through New Money Honey, another horse from Chad Brown's barn, 4-Star Crook, another horse from Chad Brown's barn, Brown is the only one that can beat Brown so far for Sister Charlie. If you think about the day that he could be having with her and with Bricks and Mortar, I mean, he might end up crowning 2 champions once they hit the wire. So this is a lot on the line. And I saw some comments from Chad just saying, you know, she's the horse of a lifetime. I'm so honored to be associated with her. And I think when you consider the turf horses that he has had so far, that goes a long way, and that's a very big statement. So good luck to Mirth. I'm hoping that Sayed isn't too much of a thorn in her side, because we know that she's going to be on the front end, and hopefully Mirth can kind of sit just off of her and create her own race. But I think it's going to be very hard to get past Sister Charlie. If I'm going to try to beat her, I'm actually going to look at Fannie Logan for John Gosden. She's improving right now, 4-race win streak for her. She gets LASIK. She's a daughter of See the Stars, out of a German mare, out of an Irish mare who is by a German stallion. She wants every bit of this distance. And I just don't think that Alfin and John Gosden are putting this filly on a plane if they don't really think she can win. They have, you know, been here. They've been to California. They've made the trip so many times. I think they have very strong intentions with her. So she's one that I would look to, and I think you will get that big price on if we're going to try to beat Sister Charlie.
All right, I'm going to go with a filly making her second start in the U.S., the 8-horse Castle Lady. I think it's a sneaky little runner here with not a whole lot of form to go on compared to some of the other runners. But you look at her first 3 races, you go back, you know, it's all green right there, right? She was perfect, including a Group 1 and Group 3 win in France. She then steps into really deep waters at Ascot, and she was positioned well off a pretty slow pace for a mile, and she was the only one who made a move from the back there. And then you go to that last race there, the QE2 Cup at Keeneland. Cambia Park, obviously, highly regarded horse. Had things her own way, though, on the front end in that race. Castle Lady sat off of her and tipped out. Got a little closer in the stretch. It wasn't enough, but I thought she galloped out really powerfully. I think she's going to fare even better with some pace to run into, as we talked about, not only Mirth, but Thais, who's always just winging it on the front end. So given the pace and stretching out, I think Castle Lady stands to take a step forward. I've mentioned on these shows before my one angle with second time, you know, North American runners that kind of keeps me away from them. And generally this rule is pretty, it's about 95%. It does depend on the trainer, but that second US start, second time Lasix, you do usually see a regression. And so that is my one concern with her. She's going to be a huge price. I just wonder second time Lasix, if she loses a step or two. So, yeah, so she's one that I would look at as a price. As you mentioned, I think Sister Charlie would be extremely difficult. I also thought number 3 Fleeting was one to give a look to. Pretty, you know, sort of, you know, the connections you know we're going to get bet. Aidan O'Brien, Ryan Moore. I've watched all those races where she, it seems like, you know, what is she doing? When is she going to make her move? She's always just, it looks like they pulled the trigger way too late with her, including the Beverly D here, where she was absolutely flying late, but just, you know, didn't make her move until it was clearly far too late, and was nowhere near Sister Charlie in the end. Had she moved a little bit earlier, who knows? I don't think she can win, but I think she's going to be a pretty nice underneath play. Have a hard time envisioning a scenario in which he doesn't hit the board. So Fleeting for me would be your if you're doing a show parlay for any reason, that would be the horse that I would play in this race. Let's go to the 8th, the Breeders' Cup Sprint. This field, again, absolutely loaded with talent. Take your pick here. Favorite is probably going to be Mitole. Has only one blemish on his resume in his last 9 starts. That stretch has seen him win 3 Grade 1s. That blemish, though, was a loss in the Vanderbilt at the hands of 4-time Grade 1 winner Imperial Hint. Just freaked that day. Obviously, Imperial Hint returns here. And this field just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. I think pace, indeed, will be a huge factor in this race. How did it play into who you ultimately landed on here, Christina?
Yeah, the pace and then also the post position really kind of dictated where I ended up, because I think you could just easily make a case for so many of these horses. And if you want to, give me your case for Mitole, I believe you. If you want to give me your case for Whitmore, I believe you. Chancelot, I believe you. I'm right there. Catalina Cruiser, I believe you. So for me, I ended up on Imperial Hint, the 9. I looked at the True Odds page. I was curious about the run style, and I was curious about the late pace. So I kind of sorted for both. We can look at the late pace. You see Mitole, very fast late. Forense Fire's not too far behind him. And then you go down the list, Catalina Cruiser, Imperial Hint. Run style was interesting to me as well. We have plenty of early pace, really no surprises there. But one of the things that I thought was intriguing is that Imperial Hint has the ability to kind of be mid-pack, but also to finish okay. He has to get the jump on the closers, but I think he will. And I think if you go back to his past performances and look at his race in the Vanderbilt, which was 2 starts back, he was kind of forced to rate a little bit that day, and he actually ended up earning his best speed figure. You can see that 125 FOB speed figure highlighted in green for you there. By virtue of where he's drawn and with the other speed in here, I think he's going to have to rate, and I think that's a very good thing for him. Hopefully we get to see another career best. But again, this is just a race that is so loaded with talent. He's my pick, but I can kind of listen to the case for a lot of other horses and, couldn't talk you off of anyone else really.
Yeah, and one note on the pace there, did see Landeskog listed as an early pace factor, early pace presence. Word is Landeskog will be scratching out of this race. That's at least what Eric Johnson tweeted yesterday. So I think you've got one less horse there to press the pace. That being said, I think there still is a fair amount of pace in this race. Joe, I know it seems like you were between Imperial Hint and Catalina Cruiser, a horse that I actually like quite a bit as well.
That's correct. I'm leaning towards Catalina Cruiser here. I like the fact that I actually like the fact that Catalina Cruiser drew the rail here. I think might control the pace of this race, and hopefully we'll get to the lead. Lightly raced this year, and he has won all 3 times he's gone onto the track. You've got Rosario on him, and he's been on Catalina Cruiser for 2 of those wins. And Joel Rosario has just a fantastic winning percentage at sprints on the dirt. And I think that if Catalina Cruiser can get to the lead and get a decent enough lead, as we've talked about before, the deep track, it's harder to come from behind on the dirt right now at Santa Anita. I think Catalina Cruiser might just hold on. As for Imperial Hint, that would be my other thought. 4 races run this year, hit the board all 4 times, has beaten Mitole, as we talked about. And I'm kind of leaning against Mitole only because I again believe that you're going to see this morning line favorite bet down, and I just can't get behind wagering on a horse that will be very close to even money, in my opinion.
Yep. Yeah, that was kind of my logic as well. I think you've made pretty much the case that I would have made on Catalina Cruiser as well. It was a horse I've been high on for a very long time. I thought he'd win last year in the Breeders' Cup. Obviously, that was his one real bad race there that you could see back last November. But it's been perfect outside of that. You mentioned Joel Rosario as well. Look under John Sadler with Jock when Rosario was riding for John Sadler, 43%. I mean, that's insanity. I mean, that's not a small sample either. That's a really large sample. And then we did another search here for trainer John Sadler. We used today's jockey, which in the search here, that's the criteria you click. And of course, that's Joel Rosario. Past 3 years on dirt in graded stakes. So Rosario up in dirt graded stakes for John Sadler. Look at those numbers. I mean, you've got, I mean, off the board only a couple of times. Once, you have a DNF, and outside of that one, you've got 12 races with 7 wins and 9 in the money finishes. Of course, you look at the horses there: Accelerate, Kalinin Cruiser, Gift Box. Those are all graded stakes races. Whenever Rosario is riding at a big spot for Sadler, the horse is gonna run well. So we know that much. And Kalinin Cruiser, I agree with you, especially in the 6 furlong race. The rail I think is fun, and I think that he's got the tactical ability to sit back just a little bit too if the pace does heat up and tip out and find his running late. And so I think Kalinin Cruiser, as far as I'm concerned, I hope this is the breakthrough day. I'm going to throw out a crazy number here. I'm going to warn everybody, this was handicapping at 2 a.m. after doing 14 hours of handicapping straight. But I somehow landed on Matera Sky. Now, I want to warn people, it's the 10 horse, Matera Sky. As we said, you got to watch how the track is playing. This is a horse who usually sits mid-pack, but if you see horses making mid-pack moves and you see pace coming back to them for any reason, which again has not been the trend on the dirt at Santa Anita, but if you see that, this is a horse who finished second to XY Jet in the Golden Shaheen. This horse has some ability. This isn't, a horse shipping in from, Japan that you just gloss over and say, oh, you know what, it has no shot. The best jockey in Japan, Yutaka Take, and some back form against horses we know, would be, formidable in this spot like XY Jet. I got to believe this horse is going to be 1,000,000 to 1. I would take a stab underneath with Matera Sky. If you're playing, exacting try boxes, I would take a shot. Again, if it doesn't work out, it was a long night of handicapping, so I apologize. But that's a horse that I like a little bit, and one that you're not going to hear anyone really talk about. So that's it for the Breeders' Cup Sprint. Let's move on now to the mile, race 9 on the Saturday card, a full field of 14 plus 2 also eligibles. Headliners are 2 fillies who've had remarkable years. Got Stormy, trained by Mark Hasse, Uni for Chad Brown. Also getting attention, Aidan O'Brien's Circus Maximus ships in off Group 1 win at Longchamp. Ryan Moore will ride. Interestingly, neither O'Brien or Chad Brown have won this race. Historically, the U.S. does have an edge, though, 21 to 14. Who do you think has a better shot this year, Christina?
I'm going to go with one of the American fillies. And I think kind of picking up on that last point that you were making, I think the reason why Aidan O'Brien hasn't had success with the fillies in this race, where he's had so much success with the Colts and Geldings in some of their races, is that he doesn't pull any punches. I mean, they run hard all year, and then they come here to compete in the Breeders' Cup, and it's a lot. And many of his horses, they're trained for fitness, they're trained hard, and they can withstand it. But I think it's a lot more taxing on a filly or mare than it is on a colt or gelding to ask that at the end of the year for them when you combine it with the shipping. So that's why I think he hasn't had as much success with the fillies as he has with the males. But I think in this race, it's about the 2 American fillies. And for me, Uni is the one on top. For Chad Brown, a daughter of More Than Ready. More Than Ready has had so many Breeders' Cup winners. I was actually looking at some of those stats this morning. He's one of the strongest. And I looked at late pace for Uni, and that was part of what kind of helped me really settle on her in the First Lady. She's one of the shorter prices that day, but she wasn't the favorite. And she just smashed the record that day. And she also has a strong late pace figure against these horses. Chad Brown, anytime you're talking about turf, route, stakes races, any kind of races on the grass, he's going to have a high percentage. But he's 23% in turf route graded stakes. And I also thought she had a little bit of an excuse in the 4-star Dave 2 races back. She moved a little bit too late. She kind of got pinched a couple times. So the only thing that I'm hoping is just that Joel Rosario doesn't give her too much to do, because she is in against the best of the year and the best that she is going to face. But I love that late turn of foot from Uni, so she will be my selection here.
All right, and I'm going to go with Got Stormy. I think you can't go wrong whether it's Got Stormy or Uni. I think it's down to those two personally. After two pretty spectacular races at a mile over firm ground at Saratoga, you got Stormy shipped to Woodbine, lost as the favorite over soft ground. I mean, of course, she was right there. As you can see, she posted a really nice number there too, 120 career best Equibase speed figure. But when you go to that 4-star Dave off of just a week's rest, she showed that she could beat the boys. Not only beat the boys, I mean, the way she won was so impressive. It's a tough field, included Uni in that race. And there isn't much speed in this race, and she usually, and it's surprising to say for a field this large, I don't see any obvious speed here. Really, I think it might be really a slow pace up front. Got Stormy can sit close enough. 4-star Dave being the exception there, and I think that she should be within range. Once they turn for home. Mark Hasse, of course, has won this race twice in the past 4 years. 2017 with World Approval and 2016 with Tepin. I think he makes it 3 out of 5 here. I like Got Stormy, and one of the Euros that I liked was the 13 Hey Gaman. Caught soft ground in his last two, didn't run well, but had two nice runner-up efforts in Group 2 company and Group 3 wins in the race before that. I think should like the ground on Saturday, and Dettori has rode this horse, has been on this horse for his better performances. So that would be sort of my little bit of an outsider play. Joe, you like one of the Euros, right?
Well, I was also doing late night handicapping last night as I was watching the fire news, the wind news, and everything else going on out here in Los Angeles. And hopefully, speaking of the fires, that doesn't affect anything that's going on at Santa Anita this weekend. Everything seems to be calming down a little right now. But I started doing some traditional handicapping here, just looking at the history of the mile. And as we mentioned, the mile's been won by favorites 7 of the last 20 races. 12 horses have won this race at 6 to 1 or less. But when the horses that are 6 to 1 or less don't win, this is also the race that seems to have the most astronomical odds coming through. Where I believe 6 of the winners have had double-digit odds in the past, and many of them over 25 to 1. In this situation, the Euros, as we've talked about, have done very well, especially when their last race has been in Europe. And just looking at the history of how this race has been won, I fell on Circus Maximus and Uni as being the horses that just fit the mold of the traditional mile. And so that's where I will be looking come race day.
Okay, good enough. Yeah, Circus Maximus, one we haven't spoken about, but I think, if he runs his race, it could be extremely tough, shipping in off of that race in France last out, and has been running and keeping really strong company. See all Group 1 company there, Braden O'Brien with Ryan Moore up. So that's it for the Breeders' Cup Mile. As we continue this marathon handicapping session, it looks like we're going to get through all these races here. We've got a little bit more time left. We've got 3 races to go. We'll go to race 10 now, the Breeders' Cup Distaff. Horse of the Year honors could very well be up for grabs here and up for the taking, really, for Midnight Bijou. She looks to cap off a perfect 2019. She's won all 7 of her starts, 3 grade 1s, nearly $2 million. Mike Smith back aboard for Steve Asmussen, Bloom Racing. So who poses the biggest threat to her? We know that she's going to be really tough to beat. If Joe Rosen had it his way, it would be Secret Spice. Am I right, Joe?
Well, without a doubt. And if I said anything different, Billy Koch and Gary Fenton might kill me. But I am one of the owners of Secret Spice and have been very lucky with her, so I can't complain. When we discussed this division 4 or 5 weeks ago, we talked how deep it was. We know how deep it is now based on Elite bypassing this race to run against the boys in the Classic. That's how deep this field is. Obviously, we have Midnight Bijou sitting here and is looking to be Horse of the Year. and probably is the class of this field. No, not probably is the class of this field. I can't argue against that. My heart obviously is with my own horse in Secret Spice. We call her Spicy, and she's been training extremely well right now. And I think you can make the same comment about many of the other horses in this competition, in this race. But Midnight Bijou is just simply the class of the field. She's a machine. 7 races this year, 7 wins this year. The only real question would be that she hasn't run at Santa Anita this year, but she has run at Santa Anita in the past. She's run 4 races at Santa Anita, and I think she has 3 wins. She's hit the board in every race she's ever run in. It's just an amazing horse. 12 wins in 18 races. Win or lose, I just think she's going to go down as one of the greatest horses of all time. And, if she wins, she deserves Horse of the Year, because this, I believe, is still the toughest division in all of racing right now. And if she doesn't win, it's only because this division is just so deep. You could really make a case for at least 5 or 6 other horses to win, especially if Midnight Bijou wasn't in this race.
Yep. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And Joe, I was with you. I was standing like right next to you for the La Troyenne when it looked like Secret Spice was going to win that race, and all the energy of the whole crew, the Little Red Feather team, would love to see that again and see you guys, really crash the winner's circle and make some noise. So we'll be rooting for you. Interestingly, that race, the La Troyenne, she finished ahead of Blue Prize, who has really turned it on, since that point in the season. Blue Prize is one that you like, Christina.
She is, and I'll echo everything that Joe said about Midnight Bijou. I mean, she really is just a machine, and I would encourage everybody to go back whenever you have some time and watch the full race of the Beldame and keep a close eye on her head carriage, Midnight Bijou, because you'll see that at one point Wildcat comes up next to her and she cocks her head to the side and looks at her, and as soon as she clocks that that horse is trying to beat her, she never let her get a nose in front. And I think that's where everybody is undone. If you hook Midnight Bijou, she will beat you. If you take her by surprise, I think you might have the chance to go by. And that's what I think Blue Prize can do. When you look at her races, she makes this big move around the turn and she blows by so quickly that nobody else has a chance to realize what's happened until they're already past. And a couple times she has kind of broken the hearts of, I think, horses that were trying to chase her. I will also tell you that tomorrow morning we're going to show her most recent work again on the Breakfast with the Breeders' Cup show. And you're going to see that she does the same thing in her works in the morning. This is how Ignacio Correa trains her. He trains her to start making that move on the turn and then just to level off down the stretch. That move, to me, is the only thing that can beat Midnight Bijou. I'm not sure if she's going to do it, but I think she has the tools to beat the favorite.
I like this. This is some deep psychology. You're going into the mind of Midnight Bijou, and I like that. I like that approach.
Maybe I'm just been handicapping too long. I don't know.
Too much late night handicapping for all of us.
There's something to that. I remember, like, when Songbird was beaten the first time, like, the thing was like, yeah, like, if she sees the horse, she's not gonna let the horse go by. I mean, and so what did Rosario do? I mean, he tipped out to the to the grandstand. I mean, he's like literally, probably about 20 paths off of her and beat her that day. So I'm with you. I think there's something to that. I'll just mention briefly here, because we want to move on to these last 2 races. I do like Dunbar Road a little bit. I think she's got immense talent. Of course, she's also a 3-year-old and is going to have to take a step forward. But I really like the effort she put in last out when she lost to Blue Prize and Elate. But to finish 3rd in that spot, it looked like it kept looking like she was going to go past, and she just never. She never shot through. She finally got some running room down on the rail, just never went through, and never got past them. But, if she could take another step forward off of that, that was only her first start, going a mile and an eighth. I find it interesting that Jose Ortiz lands here. He won the Kentucky Oaks with Serengeti Empress. Could have taken the ride on her, or probably 1 or 2 others in here, and he comes back to Dunbar Road for Chad. I think this horse is super sneaky, and I'm not going to at all be surprised if if she pulls an upset, at the very least, I would expect her to hit the board. So Dunbar Road for me, as a little bit of a price play in the distaff. All right, let's move on to the 11th race on the Saturday card, the Breeders' Cup Turf. This one has belonged to the Euros, especially in recent years. They've won 22 runnings of this race. Bricks and Mortar will be carrying the flag for the home team, 9-5 morning line favorite for Chad Brown and Claridge Stable. But Europe has a strong hand too, headlined by this year's Epsom Derby winner, Anthony Van Dyke. So Bricks and Mortar, Anthony Van Dyke, another horse. Christina, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not very creative in here. I do think it is Bricks and Mortar, and again, maybe Chad Brown, crowns a champion in here, and depending on what happens in the Classic or with Midnight Beast, I mean, maybe we're even looking at a horse of the year in Bricks and Mortar. He has the numbers to do it. He's been flawless at 5 for 5. If I'm going to try to beat him, you mentioned Anthony Van Dyke. I also thought that the last few speed figures for Old Persian were interesting, and I like the fact that he did go to Woodbine, had a race, somewhat outside of Europe, and then comes down here. Charlie Appleby has had some success already here at the Breeders' Cup. And then the other kind of crazy horse for me is the 8 Bandua. And he nearly got there in the Arlington Million with Bricks and Mortar. And so if for whatever reason Bricks and Mortar doesn't show up and you get that kind of wacky horse, perhaps Bandua steals this one for Jack Sisterson.
I like that. I took a long look at Bandua, and I ultimately convinced myself that the horse runs his best at Arlington. That may or may not be the case. Obviously, we'll find out. I think does need to take a little step forward, but first time at Santa Anita, shipping out for Jack Sisterson, that would be a great story as well. Joe, I know you like Bricks and Mortar a bit, and you also like a long shot, or a little bit of a long shot, or a little bit of a sleeper that I like as well, Arklow. Tell me why you like him.
Well, again, we're sitting here talking about a turf race, and it will be interesting because as we've talked about, as I've talked about many times already today, a lot of turf races have been won at the wire by horses running fast late. And I was looking at the late pace of both Bricks and Mortar and Arklow, and they are probably the two fastest closers in the field. It will really as to this long shot, I will definitely be paying attention to the prior turf races on the day to see if this situation where the closers are winning the turf races is still ongoing. Because if I could get this horse at 12-1 or better, and he closes well, I'm all for betting that horse.
Yeah, I'm on board. I mean, you look at, these finishes here, the 2s, the 3s, the 2s, another 2. At least a couple of those should be 1s. I mean, this poor horse, just about all of his losses can be chalked up to him being too far off a really, really slow pace or running into traffic. Now, granted, I mean, distance of this race, I mean, you're looking at a mile and a half. I mean, I don't expect the pace to be blazing hot, but it's been really, really slow in some of these races, especially the Bowling Green, and he ran into traffic there. I think he's in career form right now. I like that Javier, hops aboard here. I consider, I mean, I love Junior on the turf as well, but I think it's a pretty solid jock upgrade in this spot. I think I'll get him in good position early. And I think he's one of the most capable horses in this field, going a mile and a half. I think he's the horse for this distance. If a U.S. runner is going to make some noise, if I had to make a pick, gut tells me Anthony Van Dyke probably wins this race. They shipped him here. They shipped him to the Breeders' Cup last year, hoping to catch firm ground. What happened? Caught a wet turf, didn't run well, shipped back to Europe, wins a couple of Group 1s. He's back again, is going to get the firm ground on Saturday. So my American flag, aside, and all the pride that I've gotten wanting to win this race aside, I think Anthony Van Dyke is going to be really, really tough. And if I was going to, kind of try to pair him up with a horse or two for, in an exact, hard to leave out Arklow, and certainly hard to leave out Bricks and Mortar. So let's move on to the big one, the Breeders' Cup Classic. Race 12 on Saturday, $6 million, boys and girl, going a mile and a quarter. To be fair, Elate is one of the most accomplished female runners. She's not just any girl. She's one of the most accomplished female runners we've seen in recent years. The race mare is also the only horse in this year's Classic field with 3 wins at this distance. There's also Code of Honor, who has padded his 3-year-old resume in recent months, 2 wins at a mile and a quarter, including that controversial victory via DQ over Vino Rosso. Vino is back as well for Todd Pletcher, seeking some vindication. And of course, I've got to mention McKenzie. I mean, he's been #1 in all the polls all year. At times uninspiring, but at other times he's shown flashes of brilliance. So which version of him will we see? Interestingly, because I've seen both of your notes on this race, I think you've landed on the same horse, and it's a horse that I just mentioned, and I've somehow kind of overlooked in my handicapping here because I think he's run his best race, but might be wrong. So, Joe, I'll let you kick it off. Tell me about Vino Rosso and why you like him so much here.
Well, I'll start with McKenzie. Last time out, just didn't have the right stuff, and I think he's very vulnerable here. Granted, he didn't really take to the lead the last time out and was running from behind in the stretch and just could not catch up. And we've talked about the deep track at Santa Anita, and maybe it's just not to his liking. So I decided to look at other horses, and I turned to the outside, and I landed on Vino Rosso. First off, starting on the outside, he should stay out of any trouble out of the gate. He has tactical speed, so depending on how the race starts off for him, he could come from farther behind. He could sit just off the lead. He has the ability to mix it up depending on where he ends up after the break. We talked about him winning the Gold Cup at Santa Anita back in May, so he's been over the track. Todd Pletcher, not much to say about that. I mean, just an excellent trainer, 26% winning percentage in races such as this. And then you have John Velazquez on board, also just wins at a very high rate. The distance should not be of any issue for Vino Rosso, and you have just an amazing sire in Kalinin who has a stellar record with his offspring. So if McKenzie comes out looking flat, I'm expecting Vino Rosso to hit the line first.
All right, Christina, I'm going to let you amplify that message.
Yeah, I'm right there on Vino Rosso, and I just, really like the fact that he has a race over the track out here too. I think ultimately that's kind of what really cemented it for me, was that he did come out for the Gold Cup, and I'm sure Todd had designs on this race for this horse and wanted to see how he sits in Santa Anita. So I think that's what you saw with Vino Rosso, and so he will be the horse that I settle on. But I also wanted to pull some numbers with regard to the sire statistics, and I did this for the entire field over the last 5 years, and I went very specific on dirt at 10 furlongs at this mile and a quarter, because I think, for so many reasons we can kind of talk ourselves into certain horses, and at the end of the day, that last eighth of a mile catches up with so many of them. And I think that is what is going to be the undoing of McKenzie. I think there's always been a little bit of a question of whether or not he can, really be at his best at the distance and beat other kind of grade 1 type horses at the distance. And what you're going to see is that Into Mischief has some pretty strong statistics at the mile and a quarter. So maybe Owendale is one of your kind of price horses that you want to consider. Not surprisingly, Medaglia d'Oro is very strong. So that points you to both a late and to higher power. And then also Noble Mission. It's kind of a light statistic, and Code of Honor has a lot to do with it, but I think it's something to consider. Kalinin is strong, but not as strong as some of the others. So again, where Vino Rosso will be my horse, and he's already proven it at the distance, I think you have to really isolate those horses that have the bloodlines to excel in this circumstance, and then kind of pick through, how does the pace set up for that group? Which one of those few horses can I see really winning this race? And the only other horse I'll kind of throw at you just to keep in mind, and we're going to show this on the breakfast show again tomorrow morning, War of Will in blinkers is a new horse. We've seen how it's affected him in the morning. He's going to wear those blinkers in the afternoon. A lot of people have liked him all year round. He's going to outrun his odds. I'm very confident of that. I don't know if he's going to get the win, but he's a big horse with a big reputation. Will be a good price, and you have to kind of give him a second look this weekend.
All right, well, there's some good inside information, and also a good overview looking at some of the pedigree. It's interesting. We always talk pedigree when it comes to Derby time. Obviously, we never talk about it this time of year, especially in the Classic, because we're mostly looking at older horses, but you do have a couple of viable contenders that are 3-year-olds, and wonder how they'll do going this mile and a quarter distance. I do want to push back slightly, and I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to respond. And I want you to make a case and convince me, kind of, sort of maybe assuage some of my fears here about Vino Rosso. And I think Joe mentioned, well, it's Todd Pletcher. My concern is Todd Pletcher precisely. I love Todd Pletcher. He's spectacular. I mean, world-class trainer. But he does have a bit of a reputation of not being able to get more than 2 or 3 races out of a horse per form cycle, and they really fall off a cliff. Especially when you look at that Jockey Gold Club and how, I mean, what a huge effort that was. Do you have concerns that the third race, since coming back in August, 3 really big races, that now there might be a little bit of regression here? I'll let Joe. Why don't you take it?
Well, the third race coming off of the rest from last year was the Gold Cup, and showed up at that time. Had a month or 2 off, and came back in August, ran third. Came back in September, ran first, and now we're on the third race again. So, yes, there might be a history with Pletcher having problems on the third race, but this year at least, Vino Rosso has actually shown that the third race is not the problem. So hopefully it remains that way.
Okay, I can accept that. I look at that cycle. I look at last year though, and I look at that race. It looks like it, to me at least, it looks like it built up to the Gold Cup. I mean, that second race back, the Carter 7 furlongs, finishes 4th. That to me looked like a setup race for the Gold Cup. Whereas the Jockey Club Gold Cup this year, I mean, I can't imagine that was their idea of saving some or leaving some in the tank. So I don't know. That being said, a lot of wise people, including present company here, really, really like Vino Rosso, which scares me. The horse I like is a horse that I haven't heard many people say they like, which is probably not great. It's Yoshida. Really for no other reason than it's sort of the reverse logic of why I don't love Vino Rosso here. It's because when I look at how Yoshida came back and ran such a big race in the Whitney, he finishes within a couple of lengths of the horse who's probably the favorite or second choice in McKinsey, and then comes back in the Woodward. You would expect logically, I mean, he should win this race, and he sort of flat. I mean, he had some trip issues there, as you can see the trouble indicator will show you. He did, but I thought he was the best in that race. I think for me, at least in my mind, the thinking is, well, they're saving a little something. Looks like he's been working well. And I do think that there will be, in this year of mass craziness in horse racing, some sort of weird plot twist with some poetic justice with Mike Smith, strolling into the winner's circle after losing the mount on McKinsey. I could see it happening just because it just been that kind of year. I think Yoshida is all class, and I mean there are a lot of unknowns. A lot of horses can Code of Honor take that next step and beat a field of older horses like this. Can horses like War of Will, as we mentioned, bounce back? With blinkers on. With Yoshida, I find myself saying if, less often. And it really is just a matter of, will he show up with his best? And if he does, I think he's right there with the rest of these. So that's my closing thought. For closing thoughts, let's send it around the room. Give me a trifecta box. Who would the trifecta box be in the Classic? Let's start with Christina.
I'll pick up where you're at with Yoshida, and I'll use him in the trifecta. And I think that Mike Smith is going to recognize that he just needs to not give him so much to do as what Yoshida naturally wants to do. He wants to drop back. It kind of makes you think, and I think Steve Hasse can draw this comparison to Drosselmeyer and Mike Smith. Of course, it was going to be so far back. It just needed the right timing. I think it's going to work out with Yoshida and Mike Smith. I will put him in my trifecta. I will put Vino Rosso in my trifecta, and I'll go War of Will. Let's get that price in there too.
Okay, Joe.
Well, let's see here. Well, obviously Vino Rosso, because that would be my pick. As we've talked about, this is the year of the lady. We've talked about it as to the prior races and why Elate's here. I think I'll give her a shot to get in here with some sort of a price. And it's hard to pull McKenzie out of this completely. The horse, McKenzie does show up, does hit the board. So I'll probably look for my price with Elate and throw McKenzie in as well.
Okay, good stuff. I'm going to go Yoshida, Elate, Code of Honor with McKenzie, sort of my fringe horse there. And now I'm probably going to do a tri-key with Vino Rosso overall because I would beat myself up if I didn't. So want to say thank you to Christina and Joe and Tom Kudla for manning the controls. Before we go, though, I just want to remind you, Stats Race Lens, this week only, Breeders' Cup Special, you get 30% off your subscription to Stats Race Lens. All you got to do is go to equibase.com, go to the Stats Race Lens tab, click on it, and then when you make your order, use promo code SRLBC19. You get 30% off only this weekend. Best of luck to everyone out there playing. We've got 14 spectacular races, great betting races, great races in terms of consideration for year-end honors. And again, big thank you to everyone who participated in this. And for all the late night handicapping. I think we've apologized a few times for maybe sounding a bit delusional with a few of our picks, but I'm pretty confident that, we'll look back on this and we will have uncovered a couple of solid winners. So thank you again to everyone listening and best of luck.